And I went down, and there was no place for me to live, no parsonage. I had 3 churches, and when I went down, they put a 4th church on that charge, and I organized a 5th church. So I had 5 churches in Kenansville, and lived with a family of Quins that let me share part of their house with them. But it wasn't much of a place for people to call on the preacher because it wasn't his house. And my last year there at Kenansville, I lived in the Sunday school rooms, 2 of them, of the church, so that those were my parsonage. I lived and worked out of there for 1 year.
All right, so let's do those questions that Linda wanted right off the bat. She wanted you to tell some story about grandmother in a covered wagon or something like that.
Yes, there were 2 items that she wanted me to tell, and I can't tell you much about the trip that Granddaddy Plott had for his family. I think maybe there was more than 1 trip, but it was in length. It was just to the mountains and back home. They didn't live too far from the foothills of the mountains, at a place called Eufaula in Catawba County, North Carolina. And it had a kind of a dramatic tinge to it. In fact, that they went in covered wagons. The 2 covered wagons, the women in one wagon, and the men in the other wagon. It's sort of a prophecy in a way, kind of prophetic, that we've all been travelers. We love to travel. We've been on a lot of tours. Well, those were in my blood because of Mother's experience as a young girl going into the mountains in a covered wagon with her family.
So why did they come to the mountains?
It was nearby. They could almost see the mountains from Catawba County. You could see the mountains from Burke County, which is one of the nearby counties of Catawba. But this was not, I did not know this till I was much older, that they had done what many people in those days did. Put chairs in a wagon and off they go. But that same area, when I was a college student, held a very dramatic episode in my life. It had to do with a train and a train track. The train track ran right through Eufaula and Statesville, and the train was a more important item in people's lives in those days. It brought the news with the letters mailed to them, but also it was a way of traveling around the state by train. And many little villages had a depot and a passenger station. And Eufaula, as small a town as it was, and it's disappeared now, it's gone, but Eufaula had a post office, two general stores, and the depot agent, the man who ran the depot, all of these were there, and my granddaddy carried the mail, got the mail when it was thrown off the train, and he picked it up and took it to the post office. And all of that was exciting. We would, there wasn't a lot to excite you in Eufaula, but when the train number 10 or number 24 came through, people stopped and looked to see if anybody came into town that day.
So your grandfather Plott was a farmer and...
That's right, and he was a small farmer and elderly at that time. I don't know how long he had been the carrier for the mail. They didn't take it from house to house, they just took it to the post office. And he met each train, and it was his responsibility to introduce. It was his responsibility to be sure the mail got to the post office.